Hello again everyone, it's me Matt and thank you for joining me today. We are inside a Leopard 1A5 during a live firing demonstration at the tank show in Abernheden 2022, and this footage is from Christian Thøgersen, or at Tank Chris, his YouTube page, and he has some incredible footage from all sorts of military hardware, particularly from the Nordic nations, both civilian and military. And thank you so much for Christian for giving me the opportunity to use some of your footage. It's some of the best footage I've found on YouTube for these really cool platforms, and particularly in this setting, loading. Yes, we're going to talk a little bit about manual loading and this crew's effort and workload and actual difficulties with working with ammunition of this kind. We have to remember the 1A5 or Leopard 1 variants had the L7 105mm gun, a beautiful gun, absolutely gorgeous gun for its time. But as you can see in this footage we're going to kind of analyze a little bit today, it adds a lot of complication, particularly for the loader. First of all, let's talk about that brass being ejected out of the gun. Now, as a crew of a Leopard 1A5, they're under the realization that eventually the loader does have to eject that brass out the side of the turret, because the basket only holds about 5 to 6 empty casings, and that eventually will get clogged up. And if those brass casings do get over that turret basket line, the breech could foul the casing, and then you have a real problem. So this is a logistical nightmare for loaders of this time period using the 1A5, because it's something you have to consider that, modern loaders today don't have to do. Disintegratable ammunition that is basically pushed out the barrel and explodes through detonation is certainly a technological advancement I think we underappreciate a little bit, and I'm sure loaders of this time period were like, my goodness, I would love to have a projectile and cartridge that just disintegrates through the barrel, but this is what they were left with, is the case being pushed out the back, and it changes the dynamic of the crew being in engagements, okay? You have to get that casing eventually out of the turret. If you notice in that particular setting as well, the casing didn't all the way pull out, so it's another, ergonomically nightmare situation where you've actually got to try and get this stuff out of there, and it's also red hot, you're exhausted, and prolonged engagements, the loader is going to be tired from doing another method of movement ergonomically within the turret. And that loader there, by the way, hats off to this gentleman, fantastic job of getting those empty casings out there. But again, kind of suction loading these rounds in there, very skilled loader, just punching it in there right away, doesn't have to manipulate or hand bomb too much there. But the other thing we're about to see right now is the complication of logistics, right? The ready rack, you can see that the loader is handling on the left-hand side there, is basically his ammunition ready to go, is limited. I think it's only about 6 or 7 rounds he has access in that area, maybe a little bit more. But what you're about to see now is he's trying to find the next round to place into his ready rack. Now, there's probably SOPs in different tank crews as to what that ready rack needs to look like. Of course, you are a tank, so he's got a primarily heavy set of fin rounds on the left there, black tipped, meaning armored piercing, and he's right now looking for a squash head, I believe, or some sort of heat round, but it is blue, so it's a practice, probably just filled with concrete. But look at the nightmare of this loader having to find these rounds. The gunner has to coordinate with the loader to find these projectiles. It's basically a two-way street of saying, well, if you want this, you're going to have to turn your turret, gunner, I'm not going to be able to get it for you. And it's a bit of a burden, again, really slows down the momentum and the ability for this tank to engage targets. Now, this isn't, any change of today. There's still the, implications of having to find ammunition in the undercarriage of the tank when you are starting to run out of your ready ammunition, particularly in the blowout panel segment or the ready racks that are in the blast panel door behind them in the Leopard 2s. But it's a lot more difficult, I would say, in this setting, because the ready rack is a lot more smaller than of which the Leopard 2s is. I'm not entirely sure how many rounds can be put into the Leopard 2's ready rack blast door compartment, but it's certainly more than this poor old loader has accessible to him in this 105mm setting. You've also got to remember that the 120mm rounds, when getting access to the undercarriage of the tank, are a lot more hard to get to because they're bigger. They're just bigger rounds. But this crew is certainly working very well together. I think they're in kind of a prolonged engagement, taking their time probably with the target table. They're not on the move, so again, adding the movement of the tank to this with a loader of this kind, I can't even imagine having to operate within this kind of confines. And the also risk of rounds or projectiles falling out of those ready racks as the turret's traversing at speed. Lots to think about here as an old school loader, and I have so much respect for this guy, just punching rounds all day, keeping on going. And this gentleman does not certainly look super young. You know, I'm not trying to insult the guy, but he's certainly not the youngest chap in the woods, and he's still punching those rounds into that breech and getting ready for the next round. And a lot of hard work with those 105s. Although they're not as heavy as the 120s, the brass casing does actually add up a lot of weight compared to the disintegratable casings of which the 120mm Leopard 2s use. What I also find quite fascinating about this is the you know, unfortunate reality that you are exposing your crew to attack from that porthole, having to get these casings out of there. You're creating risk for the crew every time you have to empty that basket of empty casings through the side of the turret. It doesn't take much in an environment where you're, you know, in contested with infantry, where an infantry could see a brass casing, the first one coming out the side, crawl around there and throw a frag grenade inside of that little porthole. Very, very unlikely, but just look at the speed of this guy. Hats off to this guy. That was very, very good. Really, really good skills here. But what's your thoughts on loading the 105mm manual? I'd love to hear your opinions. Let me know in the comment section below. Once again, Christian, thank you so much for this footage. Really fun to take a look at, and I appreciate you sharing it with me today. All the best, folks. Bye-bye.